Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome to Big 12 Insiders Game Day. Appreciate everybody showing up. We've got our man, Alec, Busse, and Cody Nagel joining us again. We appreciate them joining us today. Got some things to talk about. We're going to cover today, man. There's some craziness going on in West Virginia with Neil Brown and some of his comments. Arizona State, man, are they for real, and can they compete to win a Big 12 title? Got a big game coming up on Saturday. And then the parity around college football. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I wasn't. I don't know, but it seems like there's parity everywhere. It's not just the Big 12. And maybe, just maybe, guys, the Big 12 can get more than one team into the college football playoff. We'll see. So we're going to break all that down and more. Again, as always, remember to like, follow, subscribe. Continue to leave those comments and hit the notification bell so you know when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. So appreciate all you guys for supporting us. Let's get into this. Alec, I'll start with you first. Neil Brown. I don't know, man. Here's my assessment, and then I'll let you just go off of that. I kind of think it sounded like a man that knows that his team's not that good. Not as good as what maybe expectations thought they should have been. They were a little bit out over their skis last year. Their schedule helped them, so the expectations got higher than what they were. Schedule's a little tougher, not as good. Said some stuff. It seemed like he's like, you know what? Maybe, I don't want to say he quit on his team, but that's kind of the appearance. And then almost daring the administration, yeah, this is what it is. If you want to fire me, great. I know what my buyout is. Good luck. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's quit. And I also think the dynamic of how good West Virginia is this season is really interesting to dissect because they're 3-3. Would be 2-1 in the Big 12 after losing to Iowa State this past weekend. But their three losses are to teams that are still undefeated, and we're now in the second half of the season with Penn State, Pittsburgh, and obviously Iowa State beating them most recently. So I don't think that they're necessarily bad. I just don't think they're outwardly really good. And I kind of would feel like that's how I would describe a lot of teams in the Big 12 right now. And I think he certainly has a big opportunity again this Saturday with Kansas State coming to Morgantown to kind of get a big win if they're able to upset K-State. But he just seems to have a lot of built-up frustration and angst. Obviously, covering that game, I didn't get a chance to go out to Morgantown for it, but just seemed really frustrated on the sidelines. You talked about a lot of his comments after the game. Seemed to kind of be passively aggressive, focused on the officials. And it seems like he's maybe said some other things throughout this week, Cody, that have maybe raised an eyebrow. I will say, I don't know how likely it is that he does or does not get fired. I mean, you have to remember, he signed a contract extension after last season when they won 9 games out of nowhere. So I think it'll be really interesting to see where this kind of goes and turns, but I don't feel like I would describe him as being on a hot seat.
Yeah, I don't think he's quit. The comments were interesting, but I think when you listen to it, the question that was asked too, and the entirety of the answer, I didn't really get a sense that it was trying to come across as, I don't care, the fans can, as long as they show up and have fun, it is what it is. I don't think that's really what it was. Obviously West Virginia fans are frustrated. I think they're upset that they're 500 at this mid-October point, and they're facing kind of an uphill climb to get back to into the Big 12 title contention. But he said multiple times in that answer that he understands that the fans are frustrated. I'd be more concerned if he sat up there and kind of responded by telling the fans that he doesn't really care what they think or something like that. So I think it was good that he was acknowledging he's not satisfied with where they're at. Like I said, if he stood up there and basically told the fans to shut up, I think it would be a little bit more concerning. But Mike Gundy kind of got asked a similar question this week too. What would his response be to the fans that are frustrated? And he kind of didn't really answer it, but basically said, there's 3 ways you can handle that situation. If you're the head football coach and the ambassador of the university, you can take the, maybe more political approach and try to, calm the fire or whatever. But then there's like the third way where you can just tell the fans, I don't really care what you think. I'm the one that's in charge or whatever. So, yeah, I didn't get the sense that he was trying to, just brush off the frustrations or anything like that.
See, for me, and maybe I'm taking the devil's advocate with this, is that when you tell the fans, it's going to be nice. The tailgating was fun. It should be fun. You had fun at the tailgating. I understand that you're frustrated, but this isn't Neil Brown's first job. This is not the first time that he's been under the microscope. It's not the first time that he's had a tough loss in his career that he's had to answer some questions afterwards. So for me, I don't give him a pass on giving that kind of answer because he's not a stupid individual. He's just not. So he knew what the response was going to be, and yet he said it anyway. That's my whole thing is like, why do you even say that? There's so many different ways that you could answer that question. And you're right, Cody. He did say, I understand you being frustrated. But the teams that we lost, then he did say the teams we lost to are all undefeated. We got to be better. That's literally all he had to say. But instead, he goes down the road of, well, hey, you had a good time. You were entertained, weren't you? That's not the way that you answer that question as a head coach. You just can't do that.
No, yeah. And I agree with that part. Like, you got to be more, I guess, how do I put it? I mean, I think he's got, like, rather than just saying, oh, I get you're frustrated, like, he's got to like own into that more and be like, yeah, I get we're frustrated. I'm just as frustrated, if not more. And,
right.
Kind of start pointing out the things like that need to be fixed or whatever. Rather than just, oh, well, like you said, oh, they had fun. Like they got a tailgate all day. It was a night game, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, we got another one coming up. You get to do the same thing. Like in today's college football world, like, these fans are putting even more money into their teams because of NIL. Like they can donate more. Like you can't just say, "Oh, you came to the game and had a fun time." Like no, these fans are paying to see results. So yeah, I think it's a whole interesting dynamic, and it'll definitely be interesting to see how they respond this weekend.
In a certain sense, it kind of reminds me a little bit, the tone at least, of what Kentucky coach Mark Stoops said several months back, speaking about Georgia, when he said something along the lines of, if you want a team like Georgia, go pay for one. You can buy players now. In a certain sense, it's kind of like that, where it's like there just seems to be a frustration with the way people have reacted, I guess, to the way that his team has played. Which, quite honestly, like, they should be frustrated with the way they lost to Pitt. They probably should be frustrated with the way they played against KU. They should not have beat Kansas.
Nope.
They basically got outplayed for the better part of 15 minutes of a 60-minute game against Iowa State on Saturday. I won't hold them losing to Penn State against them. Like, Penn State is a drastically more talented team than West Virginia is. I didn't ever think that West Virginia was going to win that game. But I would be frustrated if I was a West Virginia fan and they lost 28-16 and you never really had much success offensively or defensively after the first quarter. Like, that would be really frustrating to watch, especially when you spend all day tailgating and enjoying the atmosphere and spending time with your friends and family. You don't want it to end, in that kind of fashion. And now you're 3-3. And like you guys have kind of said, like, the upward trajectory for them doesn't get much easier because you also have a tough game against K-State this weekend. And then just a more difficult Big 12 schedule overall than you did a season ago, where you got all four of the new schools that were in this conference last year for the first time. So I don't think he's quitting, like I've kind of said, but I just think it's an overall boiling over of his frustration. And I don't think that the press is ever a good place for that to kind of come out for a head coach. And I feel like too often it does come out in that setting because it's just a natural place and it's an annoying thing that they'll have to do in their jobs that they don't really enjoy doing very often, I don't think.
Correct. Yeah, I get it. It was an awkward setting. I talked to Mike Casaza yesterday, who covers West Virginia 24/7, and he was there, and he was just like, he couldn't believe that he said it. That was the thing. I mean, it was a 30-minute interview, or media session, and he just couldn't believe what he heard. And he's like, yeah, West Virginia fans. He said it's going to be interesting this weekend because I said, hey, it's a hostile crowd, K-State coming in. And he was very quick to point out, well, which way is it going to be hostile? Is it going to be hostile towards Kansas State, or is it going to be hostile towards him? And West Virginia fans are pretty passionate, good fans. They understand football. So we'll see. That's another opportunity. And here's the thing, guys, before we move on. West Virginia is not out of the Big 12 race. I pointed this out. Everything that they literally want to accomplish is out in front of them. They can still go to the Big 12 championship. They can still win the Big 12. They can still go to the college football playoff if they win the Big 12. All of that is still out in front of them. It's just a weird thing or a weird time to be frustrated for it to come out that way in the press. I think that's a little weird, but it is what it is. Moving on, Arizona State. Look, big win against Utah on Friday night. One of the biggest wins that they've had there in a while. Stadium was packed, great atmosphere. Can they compete, Cody, to win this Big 12? I mean, it's tough. Don't get me wrong. Their schedule, it gets tough, but here they sit. Can they win this thing?
Well, I don't think they can now because I don't know if you guys saw, but Sam Levitt is going to be out for a few weeks now. So they got to go with the backup, Jeff Sims. I don't really have much faith, if any, on Jeff Sims to really manage an offense. I saw that at Nebraska last year. I think he lasted like 3 starts and was done. I think that's a little concerning. Now, maybe he, got into a new system. I know that Kenny Dillingham is a really good quarterback coach and kind of a quarterback guru that, maybe he fixed something with him. But yeah, I think that's a major, loss as far as their offense and being more balanced. I'd be more concerned now with that news. If they're able though to kind of weather the storm or whatever with Jeff Sims in there for a few weeks, and maybe able to get Sam Levitt back and be more balanced. Maybe they're still in the mix there. I mean, they've got Cincinnati at Oklahoma State. I mean, back-to-back road games here, these next 2 games. So, I mean, those are 2 tough matchups. And then you've got, Kansas State and BYU still later on in the schedule that, I mean, yeah, I think it'll be tough. Now, if Sam Levitt was healthy and playing this week, yeah, I mean, you got to buy into him now at this point. But yeah, just with that injury, I'm a little more skeptical now.
Yeah, I think this weekend at Cincinnati, you have to be a little bit more skeptical. I think the betting line moved from like 2.5 points in Cincinnati's favor to about 6.5 points in Cincinnati's favor. So that's a big move when a starting quarterback goes down. 4 points seems like a lot that Sam Levitt's accounting for. I do think that Kenny Dillingham will give them an opportunity on Saturday to really compete on the road at Cincinnati. I think it's kind of a difficult spot, an 11 a.m. kickoff. That's an early body clock kickoff for ASU. We've all seen the stats flying around here in the last couple of weeks, especially as more and more Big Ten teams have had to travel across two plus time zones. I think that there's just 2 wins, like a 2-11 or 2-10 type record for Big Ten teams when they've had to travel 2 plus time zones. Obviously, Arizona State's doing that this weekend, going to Cincinnati. The good news for them, though, is that they do get a bye week after playing Cincinnati. And without having too much knowledge of what Levitt's dealing with, assuming it wasn't something that popped up in practice this week, I wouldn't anticipate him missing much more than just this one game because he finished the game against Utah after getting popped pretty hard in the ribs or in the kidney type area. If I remember correctly, that's kind of where he got hit. So I'm still buying them from a perspective of they can compete and they can contend, because I think if you can beat Utah, even without a fully healthy Cam Rising, I think that you have a good opportunity to at least contend with everyone in the conference. We'll have to see a little bit more about what they can and can't do without Sam Levitt, how long he is or is not out for. But I do think that Cam Scadaboo is one of the best playmakers in the conference. I think Kenny Dillingham is probably the best offensive mind in the conference. When you combine those things, I think you have an opportunity to continue scoring points, and their defense has given them a chance all season. So I'll put them in that contending tier right now.
Yeah, I would say they're contending. It's going to be tough, though. Don't get me wrong, especially if Levitt's out a couple of weeks. If it's just one, maybe. I'm not sure they win this game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I wasn't sure they were going to win it with Levitt. Without Cody, I think you're right. As far as Jeff Sims, I've seen enough. I saw him last year. He just continuously turned the football over at Nebraska and basically single-handedly lost them 3 football games just by continuously turning the football over. But again, maybe you're right. Maybe you get into a different system, and maybe they fixed them. And Dillingham, he brought him there for a reason. It wasn't just, even if this was to be the backup, why would you bring a guy in that's just turnover prone and can't help you? There's no reason to have that guy be your backup in these situations. So maybe he's seen something. I know he got in the game the other day, but they were down on the goal line anyway, so it was a different situation. So, but we'll see. I like Arizona State just because of the style of football that they play. They're playing a lot of physical type of football. Cam Scadaboo is incredible. Those touchdown runs he had against Utah were incredible. And you're right, Alec, the defense for Arizona State, keeping them in football games, and that should travel. It's a tough task this weekend, but I think they got a shot at this thing, man. I really do. I like Arizona State competing right now.
Yeah, and I think, all you want is as a program is your defense to give you an opportunity to win every Saturday. And I think with this particular team and Kenny Dillingham being an offensive-minded head coach and having so much respect for his ability to game plan, and we saw that against UCLA last year when they ran a swinging gate offense to upset the Bruins late in the season when they were still in the Pac-12. Like, that just says a lot about his creativity. And I think when you have a supreme playmaker like Cam Scadaboo in the backfield, we know Jeff Sims has been turnover prone throughout his career, even dating back to his time at Georgia Tech. But he's somebody who has always been a really good athlete, someone who's always been a good playmaker when he's not turning it over. I think they're going to run the ball a lot this weekend. I think you can try and do that fairly effectively against Cincinnati. And if they're able to do that this weekend, I think they're going to have an opportunity to be in the game. And if it comes down to the fourth quarter and it comes down to who's able to make a few plays here or there to get a win in a close game, we'll have to see which way it goes. But I do think this is one of the more toss-up-y games in the conference this weekend. And I want to count out Arizona State.
Gotcha. Let's move on here a little bit. As far as a parity around college football, look, we all kind of got on here the last couple of weeks and said, the Big 12 doesn't have an opportunity to get 2 teams in. Maybe that still holds true, but I'm just looking around the country and the parity within these conferences has kind of changed my feelings on that a little bit. Now, maybe it was a little early. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm just looking at it, and everybody's that you would think are at the top. I mean, basically, Texas has been in the SEC for 6 months. I don't even need to say 6 months, 6 games, and they're at the top of it. Now, we thought they were going to have a talented roster anyway, but they're at the top of it. Everybody else is losing football games in that conference left and right. Bandy's beating Alabama for crying out loud. Then they go on the road and they beat Kentucky. Not that Kentucky's some juggernaut. It's just there's parity everywhere in this country. Revisiting that, Big 12, Alec or Cody, I'll start with you, Cody. Does Big 12 have an opportunity now that it seems like the landscape has changed a little bit? Do they now have an opportunity to get more than one team in?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think the reason why we kind of brought up the topic the other week about them being a one bid league was because I think we kind of all thought that BYU was probably going to regress a little bit.
Yep.
Iowa State's got, still the toughest part of their schedule coming up at the end of the season. And Kansas State didn't really look all that impressive. And maybe they still don't. But I think now, like you mentioned, all the chaos that's happening elsewhere, it's really opening a door for the Big 12. I haven't looked at a ton of current projections just because we are still in mid-October. There's so much that can happen. But, our own Brad Crawford even has, BYU and Iowa State currently in his projected playoff field. So, I mean, if it was to start today, I think both those teams would obviously be in just because, they are undefeated. My concern looking down the road is, what's the playoff committee going to do when they have to choose between, that second Big 12 team or another, SEC or Big 10 team that has the same number of losses. We're halfway through the regular season. Like I mentioned, there's plenty of scenarios that can, unfold here. But I'd just be concerned about, what's going to be, the committee's, tiebreaker scenario or whatever they're going to do to, decide what factor to use. But, I mean, we had the 4-team format for, what was it, 10 years, and we couldn't figure out, what the committee wanted to do. I mean, there was times, look at last year, Florida State undefeated, they don't get in. I mean, I get the whole Jordan Travis injury and all that stuff, but it took 10 years and we still couldn't figure out what they were going to do. Now you've got 12 teams and a whole lot more at-large bids that, it's really unpredictable on how the committee's going to sort through all that. But all that said, yeah, I think, with all the chaos that there's been, I think it's really likely now that you see 2 Big 12 teams get in.
I think the path exists. I think the best way for that to happen is obviously for the top teams in the conference. So Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, teams from that tier, Texas Tech, throw them in there. I guess if you want to throw Arizona State in that conversation, you can, to find ways to continue to win, no matter who they're playing against. Because I think what we've seen across the country is just to, in a certain sense, kind of like expect the unexpected this year. I think the transfer portal and NIL has led to a thinning of roster talent and roster talent acquisition at the very top of the sport, because the elite programs, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, aren't able to hoard the amount of extreme talent depth, competitive, ready to play depth that they were, 10 years ago when the CFP first started and throughout the second part of the 2010s. I will say, I've kind of started to get really annoyed with the whole, every week, let's project the 12-team college football playoff field. We never did this with the 4-team field. And at first it was really fun through the first couple of weeks of the year. And I was reading those things, but now I've gotten to the point where it's just I don't find much value in doing it, because I don't think anyone knows how the committee is going to select teams, like Cody kind of said. I think there's just too much data that still needs to be figured out throughout the rest of the season. And also, I just think, in a certain sense, it's like a fool's errand, because we've never seen this kind of CFP format before. And I think we're all really excited for it. I think we're all really amped up for the idea that there's going to be more games that have big impact in October, November. But right now, I've just gotten to the point where I'm fed up with it. And there's a lot of people who have just accepted the whole media conspiracy of that, the CFP is only going to select teams from the Big 12, Big 10 and SEC, because they're the ones that, drive all the ratings and all that stuff. I just don't do that. Like Cody said, I think Florida State being left out of the CFP last year was an unfortunate circumstance, but I also understand the argument for putting Alabama in ahead of them. Not to use the Nick Saban argument intentionally that he used for Bama over TCU back at the end of 2022, but
Right.
In a certain sense, yeah, betting spreads are a pretty good indicator of who the best teams are in the country. And
they took the national champions to overtime. They were that close.
Yeah. I don't know. In my opinion, it was just it's just a whole thing of just let the system play itself out. And if we get to a point after the regular season or after conference championship week where the picture isn't super clear, and it's probably not going to be, that's fine. But I don't really want to hear people complain about team 12, 13, 14 being left out of the CFP. Because if you're team 12, 13, 14, 15, you probably didn't really do enough to get into the CFP. At that point, you're leaving it up to the committee's hands on whether or not you get in. Control your own destiny, win as many games as you can. And if you do that and you do it at a high enough level, you're going to get in.
Well, you could say the same thing every year, just like in the NCAA tournament. They have the top 68 teams, and the teams, there's basically another 8 teams that bellyache about not getting in. And I say it every year. I'm with you when it comes to that, Alec. Look, those teams probably lost anywhere from 12 to 15 games. Lose 8 games, this isn't even a conversation. And that's kind of my whole point. I'm with you on that. My thought process with it, though, goes to kind of what you said, Cody. What do they do when, let's just say it's an Iowa State that's a 1-loss, loses in the Big 12 championship game, and they're a 1-loss, and let's just say it's Alabama, and Alabama has 2 losses, and one of those is the Vandy, who Vandy ends up 6-6. I don't think they will, but let's just say they do. Then how do you look at it? And my question is, what's the formula for that? Because it's just I don't think if it's BYU in that situation because of BYU's following, they take BYU. Iowa State's a little different. Middle America. What do they do there? Would they take Alabama over them or not? Again, I get your point, Alec. We don't know exactly how this is going to work, but at some point we need to know how it's going to work because kids are getting – I mean, you can't penalize somebody telling me I lost one game, somebody else lost twice, and then you take the other team and then say, well, we think that this team is just better. Well, at some point, doesn't on the field have to matter? I mean, and I think that's a lot of what people get so frustrated about is that on the field doesn't mean as much. Well, it's got to mean as much. It has to. Otherwise, that's the whole point in all of this is that it has to mean, to me, it has to mean the most. What happened on the field has to mean more than what my mind thinks how good you are, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, guys, but that's, to me, I think that has to mean the most.
Yeah, and I mean, when we had the 14 playoff, like it was, okay, if you lose a game, your playoff chance, like lose a game in the regular season, your playoff chances are really slim. Like there's a lot of stuff that needs to go in your favor. Now with this 12-team format, there's so much more room for error, I think. Like Alabama losing on the road at Vanderbilt, they're still perfectly in the mix for everything. Like it doesn't take them out. So I think
Notre
that's
Dame
kind of this.
losing to NIU, same thing.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Like if you're losing at home to a group of 5 team, like no offense to Northern Illinois, that should like automatically take you out of consideration for an at-large bid. Like that just shouldn't happen. But like the point I was trying to make is that like, yeah, like the margin for error is so much greater now that you can lose a game and everything's still in front of you. So I think that's kind of this interesting dynamic of the regular season not really meaning as much now, whereas before it was every game you have to win to be in the mix come late November, December. So yeah, I think it's just kind of an interesting thing that we're going to see kind of unfold in the second half of the season.
Yeah. And it gets into the minutia of, okay, well, look at the rankings and how the rankings and, I've been on I can't believe that Arizona State and Texas Tech aren't ranked. I get that Army and Navy are, but there's some other teams that are ranked. And I'm like, at some point, when does it become ridiculous? I don't know. I could just be a Big 12 homer, which I'm fine with being that. But again, on field, and you're right, Cody, talking about Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. But what is Notre Dame ranked now? Like 9th in the country?
They're top 15 or something. Yeah, like they shouldn't be there.
Iowa State is 9th, so they're not that high. I can pull them up here though. They are in the AP poll. Notre Dame is 12. They actually fell a spot. They were tied with Iowa State at 11 last week.
It's just I don't know.
But they're just staying up there because they have the win over A&M.
Correct.
But I mean, you can't follow that up and then go and lose at home to Northern Illinois. Like that just kind of negates everything you accomplished. So
everything.
The problem is though, and I think Michigan is a great example of this because they're ranked right now. Like 3 weeks ago, when Michigan was in the top 10, and then they proceeded to lose to Washington. I think everyone knew that Michigan wasn't a top 10 team in the country, but then you looked at the teams ranked behind them and you're like, well, I can't rank USC ahead of them. USC lost to them. I can't rank Notre Dame ahead of them. Notre Dame lost to, Northern Illinois. Like, and now Michigan lost to Washington. And okay, now they're all the way down to 24 or whatever it is. The AP poll rankings, in a certain sense, don't matter because they have no impact on the CFP. But I was talking about this with friends. I think humans like to groupthink. I think we naturally groupthink when it comes to things. And when the CFP rankings come out in the middle of November and the first weekend of November when they're released, I think it's November 4th or something like that, they're probably going to end up being fairly similar to the AP poll. Now, there's going to be differences, and you're going to be able to see the way that they're kind of leaning with different things when that first CFP poll comes out. But I think right now, like you've just seen the uncomfortable uneasiness of, well, we can't rank this team here because this team behind them has this, or this team behind them has this black eye on their resume compared to the team ahead of them. Like Notre Dame's a perfect example right now. They're 5-1. Texas A&M is at 14. They're 5-1 as well. I think Texas A&M might be better than Notre Dame now as we prepare to enter Week 8. But Notre Dame beat Texas A&M head-to-head, so you probably shouldn't rank Texas A&M ahead of Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's all convoluted. I'll be interested, Alec, too, when they come out with the first CFP rankings. I'll be very, very interested to see, because you're right. It's probably going to look fairly close to what the AP poll is, but there'll be some changes. But we still got football before all that, too. That's the one thing that I love about all this is that we're at mid-season, and we still have a lot of football left and things to be decided. So
I would also say
speaking of,
this. I would
go
also say
ahead.
this in relation to the polls. You're seeing preseason thoughts about teams start to dwindle away with the way that the rankings people are ranking schools, but there's still those preseason thoughts still infiltrating their mind. And I think Iowa State is a great example of this. Iowa State is 6-0, and they're ranked number 9 in the country, and they look like one or two best teams in the Big 12, along with BYU. Okay, great. Iowa State has earned their top 10, top 15 ranking, wherever you have them within that. Indiana, for example, is number 16 in the country. They are also 6-0. And Indiana has not trailed this season. Now, Indiana hasn't played a very good, tough schedule yet, and they will. They play Nebraska this weekend. Later in the year, they play Ohio State. I know what I just said about Michigan. Michigan still has a strong defense. They're still a more than respectable opponent. I don't know the rest of Indiana's schedule off the top of my head. But Indiana is 16th, and Iowa State is 9th. And Indiana was picked about 16th or 17th or 18th in the Big 10 this year. Iowa State was picked 4th or 5th in the Big 12, I think. So you're still seeing some of those preseason thoughts infiltrate the voters' minds as they rank teams.
Yeah, happens every year. I don't know if I'm ever going to be a proponent of not having polls come out until October, mostly because I think it's fun, but it would make sense. It would absolutely make sense. Give it till October until you actually see some of these teams out there. So speaking of that, let's look to our upset alert in the conference this week. So, Cody, I am going to start with you. Look, we got 8 games that we can choose from this week. And I'm telling you guys right now, if you all end up with the same upset of the week and lock of the week, I feel like you guys are texting behind the scenes here. So let's take a look at it. Cody, who do you have? Who should be on upset alert this week in the Big 12, my man?
Well, I know we talked quite a bit about West Virginia already, and maybe it wasn't really necessarily positive, but I'm actually going to go with West Virginia over Kansas State this weekend in Morgantown. I know we're probably going to talk about this game a little bit more later too, but if the chaos is going to continue in the Big 12, which I think it will, then I think Kansas State is probably a team that should probably be concerned going into Morgantown. Where I'm not like a West Virginia beat writer like Mike Casazza is, so I'm sure he has a better understanding of the fan base and the team there. But I just get the sense that they're probably going to come out with a little bit more fire this week, considering how last week went. So yeah, I'm going to go with West Virginia over Kansas State, mostly just on a vibes pick there.
Gotcha.
I don't hate that pick. I would look 2 different ways though. I don't think TCU is very good, but we've seen what Utah looks like without Cam Rising this year. It's been inconsistent. Isaac Wilson, who's expected to start for them this weekend, obviously led them to a win at Oklahoma State, but then played really poorly against Arizona. I could see the TCU going on the road and beating Utah, especially if they're able to put up enough points to just make Utah have to kind of keep up in a bit of a shootout. That's one that I can see. And another one that I really like, Houston is about a 5.5, 6.5 point betting underdog on the road at KU. Obviously, that game is at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. That seems like a really big line. To me, it says a lot about what Vegas thinks about Houston being one of the worst teams amongst power conference schools in the country. But is KU close to a touchdown better than them? I don't know. That seems like a lot for a team that's 1-5 and has struggled to really put games away all season. Those are 2 that I would circle as potential upset watch.
Gotcha. I'm going to go with Colorado going on the road to Arizona. It's -3. Arizona's favored at home, which everybody gets favored at home. You always get that 3 points. So I like Colorado. Look, if the guys come back, they're supposed to come back. Travis Hunter and Horn Jr., if both of those guys come back and play, which they said that they're going to, I think Colorado's got a chance. Look, they couldn't run it an inch against Kansas State, and they tried to, but they just couldn't run it an inch. But they were able to throw the football, and if they're going to be able to still throw the football, look, and Shedeur Sanders was getting crunched. I mean, just literally broken in half, and he was 34 for 40 for almost 400 yards. I understand that Kansas State had some injuries in the defensive backfield. They did, and those guys didn't come back and play, regardless of what Colorado fans are thinking, that they didn't come back and play. But having said all that, I was super impressed, and I think Arizona might be on the teeter of this going south. I think they're right there on the edge of this thing going in a bad way. I understand BYU's a really good football team, but they just got pushed around against BYU. I thought this, because they'd been so up and down all year, this was supposed to be on an upswing. It wasn't. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that against Colorado. So give me Colorado +3 on the road. Now for the lock of the week. I will start with you, Alec. Who is for sure going to win and cover this week in the Big 12?
So that seemed like a really dumb pick. But I'm going to say Iowa State -14 against UCF. I think Iowa State's the best team in the conference. They covered easily last week at West Virginia, a game that I really had no feel for going into it. I thought Iowa State would win, picked them to win by 3, but they ended up winning by about 12, I think it was, over the Mountaineers. I just don't think UCF's very good. I don't think their defense is going to be able to stop Iowa State's pretty potent passing attack. And I think they're just entering a hornet's nest. This is a fan base that's highly invested right now. It's supporting their team to a 7-0 start for the first time since 1938. Which is something obviously no one in the Jack Trice Stadium crowd has probably ever seen before. So I will take Iowa State to cover. It's near 2-touchdown spread.
Who do you got, Cody?
Yeah, I'm going to go with BYU over Oklahoma State. That Friday night game. Now, I probably should mention that I'm pretty sure the last 2 weeks, my lock picks have been upset outright. So, probably take this pick with a grain of salt and go the opposite way. So maybe that's a good sign for Oklahoma State that the matchup is going to go in their favor, despite everything on paper going against them. I just think that with how bad Oklahoma State has looked and all the quarterback issues that they have, I don't think there's really a for sure answer who's going to start for them this week. I think the expectation is that Garrett Rangel will get the start. I don't really feel confident in him going, on the road in a night game in Provo. We've talked about that earlier on the show about, how dangerous of an environment that is for, a young quarterback. So yeah, I just feel pretty confident that BYU is going to roll in that one.
Gotcha. There was a couple of them that I liked. I actually liked the Kansas over Houston, but I'm going to go with Texas Tech -6.5 at home at Baylor or against Baylor. Look, I get that Baylor keeps fighting, but at some point that's going to stop. I mean, there's only so much fight that you have when you're not a good football team. The fan base is down on you. There's only so much fighting that you can do, and when you're not getting the results. And I think this is that week where the game, I mean, it got away from them against Iowa State. I think this one gets away from them too. I think Tech is trying to prove a point, and they will. I actually like the over in this one, 55.5. I like the over on this one too, because I think Tech's going to get in the 40s and Baylor will score some points. So I like the over on that too. But yeah, give me Texas Tech -6.5 in this one at home. And then as far as the game of the week, again, I put 2 of them on here. And if you guys think there's a couple others that we should mention, please do. But I'll start with Arizona State at Cincinnati. We talked last week about a lot of legitimacy games where teams were trying to win to prove a little bit of legitimacy because people may be questioning their schedule. These 2 teams are right up there at the top of the Big 12. I mean, they just are. The records prove that. And Cincinnati has to be kicking themselves for giving that game away against Pitt. I know they are, because that game was in the bag and they literally just handed it to Pitt. Having said all of that, big game at home, Arizona State's coming in. Cody, tell me what you think about this one.
Yeah, I was much more excited about this game before Sam Leavitt was ruled out.
Right.
I think that just really kind of hurts their chances. But Again, they've had a really dominant run game. If Cam Scadaboo is able to, get, I mean, I don't think it's out of the question to think he gets 30 plus carries with the way their offense is probably going to be one dimensional. Cincinnati's run defense really isn't great. I know they've had quite a few injuries and have kind of gotten some guys back in and out. So I think if they're able to, go on the road, establish a run game, lean on their defense a little bit, I think, Arizona State can maybe keep it close. But again, I just think with the quarterback change and everything that, Jeff Sims and all his turnover issues that worries me. I think I would probably lean Cincinnati. Excuse me.
I would also lean Cincinnati. Brendan Sorsby's kind of frisky. I think he's not being talked about enough in the conference, and I think Cincinnati a year ago was maybe the worst team in the league, right up there with Houston. But this year's Cincinnati team, they play hard. They're obviously coming off of a, I think, 19-13 win over UCF a week ago on the road. I kind of like this Cincinnati group a lot more than I thought they would. I kind of agree with Cody. I think they'll be able to handle West Virginia Arizona State in just a weird setting for the Sun Devils, and a game in an environment that they probably have never experienced before, an 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff in the middle of Ohio. I can't imagine that's something that the Sun Devils have ever experienced.
No, they haven't. And it'll be at Nineport Stadium. It'll be a little rowdy there. I mean, hostile. It'll be a hostile crowd. It'll be loud. Look, Cincinnati, it's not that long ago that they understood what it was like to be in the college football playoff. So they're excited to get back to these type of football games. So early kickoff, like you mentioned, at Cincinnati, quarterbacks out for Arizona State. I mean, it sets up everything for Cincinnati to be able to win this handily. But I'm with you, Cody. I know you picked Cincinnati. We'll see. We'll see, because I think Cam Scadaboo, look, I'm a guy, if this is all we got to do, if this is what we have to do to win, I shouldn't say all we have to do, but if we got to give it to him 40 times to win the game, give it to him 40 times to win the game. And I feel like Arizona State just might do that this week, man, because you're right. Do you trust Jeff Sims? I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens. They may come out first play and throw a bomb. Who knows? I'm doubting that happens. But, yeah, give it to him 40 times. If that's the way you got to win this game, man, then just go win it and then get out of there and get you a victory. The next game that I put up was Kansas State at West Virginia. Look, I think it's a trouble spot for Kansas State. Big game coming off all the eyeballs in the world. We're watching them last week. A couple guys got banged up, including Avery Johnson. They'll be back. West Virginia, some weird stuff going on, like we mentioned, going on there. I'm just not sure that West Virginia is going to be able to stop DJ Giddens in that running game. I'm just not positive that that's going to be able to happen. Didn't happen last week, but Iowa State threw the ball on them, though. But I'm just not sure West Virginia is up to that task. I'm really not.
I like K-State to win here. I was high on West Virginia coming into the year. I had them in the top 5 or 6 of the conference. But every time they've played a team that I actually think is competitive in quality this season, like a team that just at the very least looks like they're going to go to the postseason, they have not won. I don't have a ton of respect for Albany. I don't think Oklahoma State and KU are very good at all. I think they're maybe 2 of the 3 to 4 worst teams in the conference at this point. So I think K-State wins for a lot of the reasons that B said. I think they're going to run the ball well because that's what they've done all season. I think they have a top 10 rushing offense in the country still.
Yeah, I mean, I picked this as my upset alert with West Virginia over K-State. This is a really tough stretch that Kansas State is going through when you think about going on the road to Boulder last week. And to be honest, they probably should have lost that one if it wasn't for Avery Johnson with that late touchdown and kind of responding after he threw the pick. But I think it would be if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, is Kansas State going to go on the road and on the road at Colorado and on the road in West Virginia, back-to-back weeks and win both, I probably would have been, skeptical and said no. So, the fact that they went into Colorado and won that one makes me want to lean a little bit more with West Virginia this week.
Yeah, the thing about it is that, and you're right, Kansas State up to last week. I mean, I know they won the game. I don't know how great you said that you would say they played, but they'd been awful on the road this year. They hadn't been bad. They had been awful on the road. But they won the game last week, and I give Colorado's better. Now, they still couldn't stop the run. They still couldn't protect the passer, so I don't think they can win a conference doing that. But they're better. They were a better football team and resilient football team, and Kansas State learned some of its lessons that it needed to learn and grew up a little bit, and we were able to come back and win the game. Going on the road to West Virginia, it's going to be another hostile crowd. I don't know that it can be. I was at Boulder. I don't know that it could be more hostile than that. I'll be honest with you, but it is what it is. I think Kansas State's just going to be able to run the football and beat West Virginia. I'll be honest. Those comments from Neil Brown, I know you guys aren't as big on him as I am. I just think it's crazy talk. I think it's crazy talk that a head coach would say that to the press. I get it. He's frustrated. I understand that. But you got to have a little bit more decorum. You got to have, I don't know, just a little bit more wherewithal, a little more discipline to not say that kind of stuff out loud. You want to yell it to your coaches? Fine. You want to yell that to your wife? Fine. I get all of that. But out in public, and now your team knows and hears you say that, it's just, I don't know. Just to me, it just seems like trouble. But
that's what I was going to.
Oh, go ahead. I was
going to ask you, like, what does that do from a team standpoint? Like, what if the player, like, obviously the players are going to hear about that. Like, does that fire them up? Like, hey, we're going to, go shut the fans up or whatever? Or is it like, okay, does coach not care? Like, how do you think like the players respond to that?
To me, he can't be mad. They can't be mad at the fans because the fans didn't say it. Like it would be one thing if the fans were just making all these comments and saying all this stuff and he responded to something that a fan said. But that's not what happened. He basically told the fans, hey, you came to the game. I know you're upset, but you were entertained. You had a good time tailgating. So I don't know that the team can respond and say we're going to shut the fans up because the fans didn't start the fight. You know what I mean? I'm not saying a physical fight, but they didn't start this. It's their play that started all this. Maybe they rally around him if they haven't. I mean, maybe they do. But if it were me, I would be like, what the hell are you talking about, man? We lost, we're losing. And now you're saying it kind of doesn't matter, and that the fans shouldn't be upset. And look, you hear the whole context of what he said. That's fine. But that part wasn't taken out of context. That's literally what he said. And I don't know if I'm a player, it's a mixed bag. And I would have to see how he reacts the rest of the week because I can't get too excited about a coach that's picking a fight with fans and telling them it didn't matter if we won or lost. You should just be entertained. And then him turn around and get in my face and ask me to work harder. Those two don't go hand in hand, in my opinion. Just in my opinion. I might be wrong, but that's the way I feel about it. So, any final thoughts from you guys on what's going on in the Big 12 this week, as far as any of these games, any other games that you guys might be looking forward to?
Around the country or just this weekend?
Just this weekend.
I'm really looking forward to the Texas-Georgia game. Like most people are probably. I'm really interested to see how good Georgia really is, to be honest with you. Like, they lost to Bama. They only beat Mississippi State by 10. Like, let's see how good the Dogs really are this weekend. That's one that I've kind of circled.
Yeah.
Like everyone else. I mean, it's a top 5 game, so.
It is. To me, I'll just be honest. I'm not sure how good they are. Everybody wants to laud Carson Beck. I'm not sure how good of a quarterback he actually is. We'll see. And I think Texas is really good. I do too. I think Texas is really, really good.
I don't know how much you guys have watched them. I've only been able to watch them once or twice, like last week against Oklahoma and then the Michigan game. I watch them and I feel like they just look faster than everyone that I've seen in the country, like laterally, vertically. They hit with force. I don't know what it is, but they just look like, to the eye, they just look better than other teams.
Yep. They're different. The last 5 years that they were in the conference, if you take out last year, and you could even go back a decade, they didn't look like this. They just didn't. They did not look like this. They're a different team, man. They're just a different football team. So, but they're really good. They're really good. So.
No, I just think this week's going to be even more chaos than what we've seen kind of the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, everyone was like, "Oh, it's kind of a boring schedule." That's normally when you get those crazy upsets. Obviously, last week everyone had it circled as the best regular season week of the season, and I mean I think it produced kind of met expectations. But I think you got to put this week right up there too. I mean, when you think about the matchups like Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, even
That's another
LSU,
one, which is the fraud.
yeah, even LSU, Arkansas.
Yeah,
Arkansas is not bad.
No, Cody likes the game. I don't think LSU. I'm with you. I'm not sure how good LSU is because I'm not sure how good Ole Miss is. I don't think Ole Miss is tough. That's
I
my
think
thing. I
Garrett
don't think
Nussmeier's good.
Who?
I think Garrett Nussmeier's good. LSU starting quarterback.
He is. He's very good. He's very good. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So, well, I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you guys again for joining us here on Big 12 Insiders Game Day, and thank everybody else for taking the time to watch. We appreciate you. Continue to like, follow, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We will see you guys again next week.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.